Thank you all for joining. We're going to wait just about 30 more seconds and then we'll get going on the presentation. And today we're going to speak about our FlexMFG Job Shop product. And I'll get rid of my mug. There we go. Okay, let's begin. Thank you all for joining. Today we're going to talk about the Advanced Solutions FlexMFG Job Shop manufacturing software. And this product is designed for job shops and engineer-to-order operations, and it serves all areas of small through medium to large size companies. And in terms of competition, think Macola or ECI or Epicor or other ERP systems that are dedicated to the job shop and engineer market. Now, the thing about our product is that we are 100% integrated and written in Acumatica, and we augment the Acumatica distribution edition that you see in this kind of sandy or taupe color. The key behind our product is that we take the Acumatica kit and turn it into a bill of material. And this bill of material has all the strengths associated with a ERP BOM. I'll mention that in a moment. And that BOM can be driven by a work order, and then we can apply material requirements planning in terms of assuring that we have products. And MRP integrates with the purchase order tool within Acumatica. The BOM integrates with the sales order in Acumatica, and all of the distribution and trade functions integrate with Acumatica Finance. So what are our features? First of all, unlike the Acumatica Estimates module in its full manufacturing, we can have unlimited BOM or BOMs within BOMs indentures, and each one of the components or the BOMs can be serialized. Secondly, we can quote items that are not in the Acumatica stock item. So often in the job shop and engineer to order, you quote something and the prospect doesn't buy it. And so you don't want to fill up the Acumatica item master with items that are not purchased. So we have what's known as placeholder items. And these placeholder items can interact with stock items, meaning that you can put into a bill of material both placeholder items and items that come out of the Acumatica inventory ID. Thirdly, we have this concept of templatized BOMs. So sometimes job shops, everything's the same, but the labor has a consistency to it. So it's the same type of process because maybe you're in the rack building business or the platform building business or the truck bed building business. No two are alike specifically, but there's a sameness in terms of their construction. So we have the ability to generate templatized bills of material, and it helps you more quickly put together estimates. In terms of ERP, we capture labor, we capture costs, we can do partial billings and materials. We provide a fully competitive rich product in comparison to the Macolas and the other competitors out there in the market. And then the other final thing is that we fully integrate with Acumatica Financials. So you can establish costs, then you can do cost controls, and at the end do your actual cost to your billing costs and the like. And then you have all the neat Acumatica features like integrating videos and work instructions and the like. So let's talk about the workflow. Customer requests. We can build from scratch a dynamic BOM, include placeholder material or items out of stock, add labor, price and margin, and generate the quote. And then use Acumatica to email the quote to the customer, put it in DocuSign and the like. Customer says yes. We then are able to add the dynamic placeholder items into the item master and convert the quote that we generated into an order. This generates the work order that we'll utilize to build the item. And again, it can be multiple indentures in the BOM. The BOM includes material. The BOM includes labor. If you don't have the material in stock, we automatically generate a purchase order. When they receive the goods, they're received into raw material, multiple indenture BOMs, and then we can generate the finished goods and complete the job. When we complete the job, we of course relieve all the component inventory, we collect all the labor, and then we can do neat things like calculate the cost of goods sold, do a variance of plan versus actual, and really do a complete ERP job. Now, our product is also able to build things like in a stock environment. And here you've got multiple BOMs. And I bring this up to show you that in more complex job shop operations, where you've got multiple bills of material that roll up into a complex finished good, we can do that. And then across all of these BOMs, we aggregate the demand so that each level isn't going one PO per part, but we aggregate parts across all BOMs. And this can be for one order or for multiple orders and multiple work orders per a specific sales order, or multiple sales orders that complete multiple work orders. So our MRP engine is again world-class in terms of its ability to generate the demand to utilize Acumatica's purchasing. And then I've got this one little slide to show you that you've got some environments that are a mix of job shop and make to order, and all the functions I just mentioned equally apply. So fully integrated with Acumatica, dashboards, work orders, side panels, and the like, complete set of menus and reports and the like. We'll show you that. A couple of nice things are we've got the ability to enter labor. We don't use an Acumatica license to do this. So if you're on a smaller system and you've got 20 people out in the shop, they can enter labor by scanning. We can do a stop start on the clock. So you can do clock time, clock in and clock out, utilizing the computer to capture the labor, which then goes into the BOM, which goes into the cost of goods sold. So overall benefits, we're architected for job shop and the engineer to order market. So this gives you a cost-effective tool to expand the Acumatica footprint and meet the ETO competition, for example, in the Macola marketplace. And of course, what this helps you to do is to sell more deals. So with that as an introduction, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it over, and we'll get right into Jake. And Jake's going to give you a presentation of our system. Thank you for your attention. Okay, Jake, please take it away.
Great. Thank you, Jim. Jim, since you're unmuted, could you confirm that you can now see my Acumatica instance?
I can see the showcase. Now I can. Yes, got it, Jake.
Okay, good. Very good. All right. Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you everybody who's joining us for this webinar. We are going to be going through that workflow that Jim just described for us, exploring some of the features and functionality of FlexMFG's Job Shop. So in that vein, we are going to be starting by creating a quote and then walking through the quote to production to invoicing process. As I go ahead and pull up a new sales order transaction here, I do just want to say, by way of providing some context, the data set that I'm going to be primarily interacting with here today is some data that we had previously prepped for a prospect who did aluminum siding manufacturing for vehicles. So if you didn't know, certain vehicle brands will use aluminum for their vehicle siding. And this prospect helped in manufacturing specific pieces for those vehicles. So that is the primary data set that we're going to be interacting with today. But that's just one of a plethora of different use cases that would benefit from job shop type functionality. And we're just going to give this a refresh here and give him a second to start over. Apologize about that. Okay, start by going into our sales order workspace. We're going to create a new record, which will begin as a quote. Okay, so I am going to change my order type here to be a quote. And as I do that, I'll go ahead and I'll first identify my customer like I would in any other scenario. And as Jim was indicating, within our Job Shop module, we do have the ability to account for placeholder items. If every item that I quote and then produce is unique enough that there's really no sense in starting with a specific stock item, and it instead makes more sense to use a placeholder item until this new product is configured and provide a quote from that newly configured item, that's what we can do. So for my inventory ID, I'm going to go ahead and type in my placeholder SKU. You can see that I have a couple that pop up, but I'm going to use this first placeholder item. And as that populates, I'm going to identify a quantity here, and then I'm going to mark it as needing a dedicated work order, otherwise just known as marking it for production, like I might in Acumatica's core manufacturing suite. So now that I know that I'm going to be generating a new item from scratch with my placeholder item, and I know that it's going to have a dedicated work order, once I save this, even though that I'm operating from a quote here, I still have the ability to generate a new work order and associate it with this sales order or this quote in this example. So I'm going to go ahead and generate a new production order that will be linked to this quote. Okay, you'll see that we now have a work order number that's been generated. And I'm going to go ahead and open this up so we can take a look at what this, where the bill of material will eventually be stored. Okay, you can see that at the moment there's very little information on here because we're using a placeholder item to generate it. The reason we're using the placeholder item is because we don't know enough about the item or the manufactured item to use a different stocked item. So we know that this is attached to a particular quote for a particular customer. We know how many we're going to need, but for the most part, we are going to have to completely fill out our bill of materials from scratch. But that doesn't mean that we'll necessarily need to key enter every single line of our bill of materials. Like Jim was indicating previously, if we have done, if we do a lot of similar but different types of manufacturing, we have the ability to save previous bill of materials as templates. So if this job that I'm working on now is similar to a job that I've completed in the past, I have the ability to pull in that information. And in this case, I'm going to pull in this item beginning with A for aluminum and use that saved template of a bill of materials as my starting point. And so you can see that the last time I created that particular item, we used this size of aluminum siding. We did apply this particular outside process to it. It was shared with an outside vendor. And it looks like in this case, there was no labor associated with that bill of materials that I just imported. But just like I was able to import a previous bill of materials for my material components, I can do the same thing now for my labor and non-stock items. If I have an idea of what work is going to be required on my part to complete this finished good, for example, if I know that per my customer's requirements, they're going to need me to fabricate and then deburr this these finished goods, I can go ahead and pull in a template that will bring up those labor items for me and those non-stock items for me. And so now I'm starting to get a brand new bill of materials for this customer and their specific order based on some previous bill of materials that I've configured for similar but different requirements. So as I pull that information in, whether it's a material or a labor component, you'll see the cost being listed for each one of those line items. And that's going to be aggregating down here in my cost and job pricing tab. So you can see here that we're being given an estimate for the total cost of our material and labors, and a total for that that's being divided by the planned quantity to give us our individual unit cost. Now, if I make any changes to this bill of materials, because this is a dynamic bill of materials, for example, if I determine that in this instance, I'm not going to require any outside processing to anodize this raw material, I can simply remove that. And as I remove it, my cost will be automatically updated to reflect that. So you can see now that our unit cost has gone down because we've removed that component from this bill of materials. So as I make changes to it, whether it's by importing templates from previous jobs or removing lines or adjusting my estimates for how long some of this labor might take me, as I can make changes to my quantity required or my quantity required per unit of measure, my costs are going to continue to update. More crucially, these planned costs will eventually form the basis of the quote that I give to this customer. So from this production plan, as I've determined what my estimated costs are going to be, and I know that's going to be just shy of $100 per unit, if I determine that I want to have a 50% markup on these items as my selling point, I can indicate that here, and I'll be told what my actual profit amount is going to be per unit. And if I'm content with that, I can, from this production plan, price my sales order. And so FlexMFG will take the information that's been aggregated here and write that back to the quote, which we were just taking a look at a moment ago. So now that we're back on my quote, if I refresh my page, we'll see here now that we have a per unit price with that 50% markup that we were just taking a look at, and then of course our extended price based on the quantity that we're actually going to build. Assuming that we can email this out to the customer and they are satisfied with what we are offering to them, and we've won this opportunity, we're able to convert this quote now into a sales order and put that production plan that we were just taking a look at into production, then I'm able to go ahead and copy my order just like I would be in core Acumatica. But crucially, my work order number is going to carry on over with me from my quote to my sales order. So all of my key information is going to be retained. I'm still going to have this linkage between my production plan and my sales order that I'm producing a new finished good for. But you will notice that something has changed as I open this up. Previously, my production order was in a status called quote to make sure that it would not be accidentally mixed in with the rest of my production orders and prematurely get released to production or into our MRP or anything like that. But because this is now linked to a sales order instead of a quote, our status has updated to planning, and we can now have a different kind of control over it. So now that this production order is in planning, I can go ahead once more and start to review this if I'm the production manager who's now taking a look at it, or the purchasing manager. Some information I'm going to need to know is whether or not I need to source any more components before I can begin production on this. And you can see that some of that information is already starting to be compiled at the line level. But I can also just go ahead here and say check inventory to make it a little bit more explicit what's going to be needed from me. I'm attempting to build 20 of a brand new finished good using this component, and I can see that I only have 9 coming from my inventory, which means that I'm going to have to purchase, in this case, I'm going to have to purchase 11 to be able to complete production for this. You can see also here that my vendor lead time is being aggregated, and that vendor lead time is also what's driving my estimate for when labor is going to be completed. If you can see here, I come over to my labor tab. We have estimated operation start and end dates based upon that vendor lead time. So we're not estimating to be able to start production on this today because we haven't received all of our goods in. We're estimating that our material is going to be available 3 days from now based upon our vendor lead time as dictated by that vendor's profile. You'll also notice that in this case, although it's not required, if there was something that we could not fulfill from inventory, but instead was something that we produce, that would be indicated here as well. As Jim mentioned, FlexMFG Job Shop is capable of handling BOMs within BOMs and that of unlimited indentures. So it could have been the case that this particular item was also a component that required subassembly, and that would be indicated here. And by completing planning, we would be able to generate the necessary child orders for this line item so that we could complete the parent production order. But in this case, we are going to be able to source some from our inventory, and we're going to be able to purchase the rest. You'll also notice this partial completions tab. If I were of the mind frame to take a look at what I have available to me and say that, well, I do have the capacity to complete production on 9 of these finished items based on what I have of these, based upon what I have of these components, I do have the option of creating a partial completion based upon the fact that I do have 9 of these on hand. So if I complete planning, and this is now in a status of planned, and I want to go ahead and push this through to production and manufacture the 9 that I'm able to manufacture, as soon as I release this to production formally from planned to a status of released, we can start to mark production against it. Now you see that by releasing it, we have created a unique kit reference number, because the kit assembly in the background is what will formally allow us to consume these components and produce this new finished good. But if I want to go ahead and instead of waiting to release all 20 of these at one time, I had the ability to create a partial completion and indicate the fact that I'm going to be able to create 9 of them. And if I do that, that will generate its own kit reference number for exactly the quantity that I specified here. So if I wanted to do a partial completion, I could go ahead and complete these 9 finished items. I don't need to open up this kit assembly to release it from here. I just want everybody to see what's going on behind the scenes. I can actually release it just by submitting complete partial from down here. We'll complete a kit assembly for 9 of this finished good, and this kit assembly function will be adjusted to indicate that we only need to complete another 11 rather than the 20 that it would indicate now. So partial completions are possible, and then like you would expect to be able to, we could go ahead and then ship ahead the finished goods to the customer while we wait for the remaining of the components to come back in. But in this case, what I want to do is just push this into production all at one time. So I'm not going to do a partial completion. I'm going to go ahead instead and purchase my required materials. And if I click on my actions again, you'll see that I have the ability to do that from this screen directly to generate those purchase orders. But for the sake of being able to show our MRP functionality, I'm going to exit out of my production plan and come into my light manufacturing workspace and come to my production requirements processing center, which is our version of the MRP. So you can see here that I just need to first identify what warehouse I want to review my purchase requirements for. And I can make some other selections about what status of work orders I want to take a look at and whether or not they're on hold or not. But this production requirement screen will display all of my open work orders within my defined date range and within the warehouse I'm particularly interested in looking at. What this production requirement screen will do is query all of my needed components across all my open work orders and aggregate whatever needs to be purchased to consolidate them onto PO by vendor. Now in this case, I'm only interested in purchasing for the specific production plan that we've been working on. But before I process that, I'll give you an idea of what the format looks like of the report and the logic that's taking place behind the scenes. So if I open my production requirements report, we'll see a report indicating by inventory item, by component, what we need to purchase. So at the moment, this particular inventory item is only needed for a single work order. We can see that work order's requirement of 20 we can see that we only have 9 on hand that have already been allocated to it. So by default, we're going to get a purchasing recommendation of the difference. Now, if this inventory item were needed across multiple work orders, or if there were multiple items required for this work order, that would all be consolidating again by vendor. So if I'm content with purchasing whatever I need to purchase to complete this, keeping in mind how many are going to be required and keeping in mind what my vendor lead time is, I can go ahead and process from here to generate my purchase orders. Okay, so as this finishes processing, a new purchase order will be generated for us to receive. I know that per my Acumatica instance, it should take about 3 days for that PO to arrive, but I'm going to go ahead and receive it right now anyway. Okay, so here's my purchase order that was just generated for 20 of that item. And you could see that in this case, my purchasing settings were set to purchase the total amount for that work order rather than consuming what was already in stock. So I'm actually going to receive the full 20 here. Okay, and once these have been received in, I'll be able to complete production on my entire production plan. So we'll give this one moment to finish executing. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and release this immediately. For the sake of time, we kept this to a simple single purchase requirement, so you wouldn't have to watch me release several different purchase receipts across several vendors. But I hope that you're still able to see that that MRP screen we were on would be capable of generating as many purchase orders are required across all of our needed components for whichever production plans we dictate. Okay, so now that this has been received in, we can go back into our production plan, which I'll open from the sales order. And in this case, now that we've received those finished goods in, if I check my inventory again, we'll see that we're going to be able to fulfill all 20 from our inventory. Okay, so at this point, I have a few options of how I want to collect or how I want to capture time and material for this finished good. I do have the option to quick complete, which would essentially backflush the items and the time associated with this bill of materials. We also have a separate screen that Jim was mentioning where we can barcode scan start and end times without consuming a user entry, and pending time, I'll be able to go back and take a look at what that screen looks like. But for the sake of this demo today, what I'll go ahead and show is that we can also record the quantities that are going to be consumed right within this production plan as well. So again, the goal here is to be able to compare our actuals to our estimates by the time we actually push this out to the customer. So you can see that I'm able to either indicate how many total I consumed, or if I want to specifically record scrap that went into the production here, if I scrapped 1 or 2 raw materials as is went through production, I can indicate that here. That will create a separate general ledger transaction to record why those were consumed, specifically as scrapped. Or in this case, I can just say that although we were only expecting to use 20 to produce 20 of this finished good, we ended up consuming 22 instead. And on the labor side of things, if I want to key enter here instead of using that barcode entry screen, I can go ahead and once again key enter the fact that it may have taken me less time here than I was expecting to do my fabrication. It might have taken me exactly as much time as I thought to run through my cycles. And I might have actually gained some time here on my labor, even though we wasted some raw material along the way. So as I record those changes and eventually indicate the fact that I did in fact produce 20 of this finished good, and I'm going to say that I completed it today. Now that I've identified that information, again, I could have captured that information on a couple of different ways, but for the sake of time this morning or today, I'm entering it here. Once I've indicated what I've produced, when I've produced it, and what I've consumed along the way, I'm able to complete this order. I'm going to get a warning that some of my consumed quantities are different than we were expecting, but that's okay. At least in my instance, it's okay. And as I complete this, we are going to add 20 of this finished good into inventory. We will appropriately decrement these raw material or these components out of inventory, and we'll be able to compare our estimated cost against our actual cost. And so you can see that our material costs were higher than we were expecting them to be by about $100 because of the scrapped material we consumed. But you can see that we also saved about $90 in labor time because we were able to complete the manufacturing in less time than we were expecting. So on aggregate, our per unit cost was significantly lower than we were anticipating it to be. So our sales margin on this production plan and on this sales order will actually be greater than the 50% markup that we had given it to begin with. But either way, now that this has been completed, if we return to our sales order and I refresh the screen, we'll see that this is no longer just being fabricated, but if I refresh, the representative SKU is now available to be shipped out, and that's why I now have the ability to quick process or create a shipment to my end customer. So there is more that we can show, but for the interest of time today, that was the workflow that we were hoping to show. And at that point, I will stop here and review if there are any questions that have come in. And Lindsay, I think that I'm looking in the right place, but I'm not seeing any questions. But I'll stop here and just give a moment to see if there are any from the audience that can be answered quickly, or if I can promise a follow-up instead. If there are no questions, of course, after this webinar concludes, we will make it a point to share the recording of this with all of the attendees so that if there's something you'd like to go back and review, and you may have follow-up questions based upon that review, we would be more than happy to field them and assist you in any way that we can as you continue to serve the Acumatica community. So I'm still not seeing any questions. So Lindsay, I apologize. I believe that Jim has had to drop off here, but I'm not certain of how to end the broadcast.
All right. Yeah, no problem. Thanks everybody for your time today, and we'll follow up with the recordings tomorrow.
Great. Yep. Thank you all so much for your time, and looking forward to hearing from each of you.